Shut up and sit down.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my very great pleasure to introduce to you the next speaker at the 2020 Digital Hash Bash broadcast. He's the executive director of the NORML chapter here in the state of Michigan. He's also principal of Cannabis Counsel. He has so many other credits, you can't even begin to scratch the surface. Let me just say, welcome to the broadcast, Attorney Matthew Abel.
Hey, thanks, Rick. It's great to be here. Happy Hash Bash, everybody.
Yeah.
So, what a wonderful day, considering that we're all more or less indoors. I want to thank Jamie and Rick for putting this together. And can you hear me now?
We can, yes.
All right, good. Thanks to Mike Komorn and Deb Thomas and Jim Powers and Adam Brook, Jeff Frazier, Amanda Joslin, and everybody who's behind the scenes there in the studios and remotely. We appreciate all your efforts. You're doing a hell of a job. And so it's a little different this year. Usually, one year I wrote a very diplomatic speech and gave it very measured and everything and got no response from the audience. So the next year I said, well, fuck that. And I went out and just yelled into the microphone and happy Hash Bash, everybody. And you get a rousing reply that way. And so I've learned over time that that's the way to do it. And it's a little different this year. But I want to echo what some of the previous speakers have said. Representative Robbie was talking about making some amendments to the legislation and to allow patients and caregivers and adults to grow more plants. And for the medical, they're allowing the medical and the rec licensees, it looks like they're allowing the count to be flowering plants, not just any plants. And I think that ought to go for people at home as well, that you should be able to have 12 flowering plants, not just 12 plants. So Representative Robbie, if you're still listening, just put that one in your quiver and think about that. We need to continue on with expungement of marijuana convictions. It was a terrible loss to see the passing of Isaac Robinson, who's been a good friend to the movement for many years. We mourn Isaac's loss. And in his memory, we need to push this expungement that he really carried the ball on for quite a while. We need to get this through the legislature and have the governor sign it so that people who are doing what's legal now, who were doing it back then, should not be punished. I support the decriminalized nature aspect. We definitely need to decriminalize any kind of plants, but remember, some plants are toxic and some plants are maybe not toxic in low quantities, but are toxic in higher quantities. So just because it's legal doesn't mean it's good for you. But on the other hand, the things, making things illegal is definitely not good for you. We know that. So we need to empty the prisons and jails of nonviolent offenders. And it's cruel and unusual punishment to give somebody death for, a shoplifting offense or something like that. And that needs to change. Echoing what the Drug Policy Alliance is doing these days, they're objecting to the president sending Navy ships to Venezuela, where we're using personal protection gear to protect our soldiers, which we should, but there's no reason to be escalating the war on drugs now. What we need to do is hunker down and have a war on the virus. So fuck you, Donald Trump. If I can just say that, I mean it. And anybody who doesn't like it, please unfriend me on Facebook. In these times, I am so tired of arguing politics with people that I think it's really clear. And maybe it's a Rorschach test where people see what they want to see, but it's clear that the national administration laid down on this for a couple of months, which is causing a lot more death and destruction. So one thing I noted through in an email, 51 years ago today, CBS canceled the Smothers Brothers comedy show because they refused to censor a comment by Joan Baez, who wanted to dedicate the show to her husband, who was going to prison for protesting, for objecting to the draft during the Vietnam War. So this is a continuation of the protest movement, and it's not over until every marijuana prisoner is free. It's not over until marijuana is legal, not only in Michigan, but across the country and across the world. We know that the laws against prohibition do a lot more damage than good. Finally, I want to say happy birthday to Hoss Plord, who's been a longtime supporter of Michigan NORML and the cause, and to everybody else out there. I'm glad Debbie Dingle was on. What happened? Did somebody mess with her feed? Because she's one of the few congressional representatives we've had who have appeared at Hash Bash. And Adam, I like your suggestion that hopefully we'll be able to do this live next year, but that we ought to do it online as well, and bring in people who don't want to travel that far to come to Ann Arbor on a cold Saturday in April to continue the protest. So Mike Komorn, Jamie Lowell, Adam Brook, Rick Thompson, and everybody else there and behind the scenes, thank you all very much. And thanks for having me on the show today. Happy Hash Bash, everybody!
Happy Hash Bash. Well said,
Good job,
sir.
Matt.